What makes a two-time exited founder choose AgeTech investing as his next big move? In this episode of the AgeTech podcast, I sit down with Ivan Yuen from Elder Ventures to explore why he sees the aging of the population as one of the biggest opportunities of our time. Ivan, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Karen. Nice to talk to you today.
Thank you. So, this is actually the first time you and I are meeting. And while I was reading sort of your bio before this conversation, the one thing, like the tough question that popped into mind is how come a two-time exited founder from other industries decides to start an age tech fund of all things? I mean, of all the types of funds he could have started, or of all the types of startups he could have started, why an age tech fund?
That's a great question. As you said, my background is in consumer software and digital entertainment. And after my last startup, which I started for over 15 years, I was looking for different startups to work with. And I was looking for, I guess, big trends that I think would have long staying power, that are not, I guess, trendy, flash in the pan. And aging is one of those. So it's a global challenge that affects nearly every society around the world. And tech, I think tech has a large role to play in that. And especially here where I am in Canada, but there are not enough founders, not enough entrepreneurs and investors focused on this area. And I thought that with my consumer experience, my storytelling and community building background, that I can help some of these startups, um, you know, tackle some of these problems. And so I started Elder Ventures, which is my own personal portfolio, investing in age tech startups in 2022. So it's been about 3 years. And to date, I have 10 companies in the portfolio. And it's been an exciting learning experience so far. And like you said, why completely different industry, completely different sector? Part of it is because I spent 15 years in consumer entertainment, into digital entertainment, and I felt like I needed something new to kind of reset my thinking. Because at that point, I was talking to a lot of founders that were working in consumer entertainment, and because I spent so many years thinking about those problems either seem solved to me already or they seem unsolvable. And so I think switching industries, going into tech for adult, a lot of it is in digital health or med tech, kind of forces me to start from zero again. And I think that's could be a very superpower for me. Okay? Like it actually helps me look at the problem as with a fresh pair of eyes, with a fresh lens. So that's a bit about my background and why I started Elder Ventures and started working with AgeTech startups.
This is fascinating. So, what was your investment thesis when you were just starting out? What types of startups were you primarily looking to invest in? And how has that evolved over the past 3 years?
Mm. I think because of my background in consumer software, initially that was my main focus. I was looking more for, I would say, B2C consumer. A lot of it is digital health. And but I was also open to other areas that are catering to older consumers. So it might be fintech, it might be marketplaces, and it might be social connection and mental health. All those things were interesting to me. But as I started talking to more founders in this area, I found that I think each tech still skews very heavily towards health and medical startups. So I think part of it is because that's maybe the first thing that comes to mind when people think about aging. But secondly, especially in the US, so much of it is covered by insurance. So if you want to tap into that pool of money, it, your startup is going to be catering to the medical needs.
Absolutely. So I find it fascinating that you, obviously because of your background, wanted to focus on consumer software startups, because I feel like that is scaling consumer startups, like purely B2C startups, is very, very challenging to do, and you managed to do it successfully. So what advice do you find yourself giving your portfolio companies over and over again? And how do you see them scaling in this day and age? Because the 2020s, we live in a very different world than we lived in even 10 years ago. So how is that different?
Yeah, so I do spend a lot of time talking to founders about how to take their consumer product to market. So go to market, scaling the product, finding the right distribution. Like you said, it's very tough for B2C because there's really no single good place to access these consumers. And for consumers, especially in aging-related technology, it often they're looking for it right at the point where they need it. It's like something happens, and then I need to go find a solution. It's not something that you can advertise to them or reach out to them before the need arises. Um, so getting back to what are some of the advice that I have? I think one is especially in businesses that are building marketplaces, it's even if you're going B2C, it is useful to have a B2B channel to kind of kickstart that marketplace. I think that's one strategy that's worked, and so they worked from our last business, even though we were going to consumers, we were talking to businesses to help bootstrap or create that liquidity within the marketplace. So that's one strategy or one technique to help businesses get started. Another is, and I think this is one of both the strength and challenges for founders in AgeTech, because as you know, a lot of founders are really passionate because they came across or they identified the problem through the personal experience, either themselves or taking care of a loved one. And so when they're building the product, they're I'm speaking in, generalization there, but very often they're thinking about their own experience and their own journey in discovering or coming up with a solution to the problem. So very inwardly focused. And so one of the uh, advice that I share is either step back a little bit. You have to kind of remove yourself just a little bit, enough so that you can take a step back and look at the broader market, broader opportunities, and not be too focused on the personal experience and challenges. That's why I said it's both the strength and a weakness, because you're so focused, so passionate about that one problem, one personal experience, and might blind you to other opportunities that are nearby.
Exactly. Like you said it perfectly. It is a double-edged sword because founders, like 99.9% of the founders in this ecosystem, have a personal reason for starting their company. So the motivation is like up high, but then you also can't like neglect the foundations of user-centered design and really work with a broad range of users and buyers to validate that the problem exists for other people than your parents or grandparents, and also that there's a willingness to pay and that there's a budget. Someone has a budget to pay, because otherwise you're just like, if you build it, they will come, doesn't always work out the way you expect it to.
I think spending the time to look at the market, where the market is taking up, what is the business model, what is the distribution, all of those things tend to be secondary for founders that are very focused on solving the problem, the immediate problem that they experience.
Absolutely. So, and one of the things that I think is really an amazing opportunity in this day and age, particularly in 2025, is sort of the barrier to entry to starting a tech company has been lowered because of AI. So you could potentially build $1 billion company as a single founder. And you could also potentially bootstrap a company and serve niche markets that in the past you could not serve because no one would provide you venture capital funding. And on your own, it might have taken you too long to get to the point where the company is profitable.
That's right. And I think that's one of the appeal for me for consumer software and to some extent digital health as well is that it is infinitely scalable. It reach everybody on this planet. And so, like you said, it's a very small niches, but if you're serving everybody out on that's dealing with this problem, then all of a sudden that they get a market.
Exactly. And so, and you don't necessarily have to build a billion-dollar company. Not everyone has to build billion-dollar companies. There are plenty of other opportunities out there in which you could still build a profitable company and have a solid product in a good market that really solves the need for real people, and without the stress of raising tens of millions of dollars in VC funding or hundreds of millions of dollars in VC funding to be that billion or $10 billion company. So what do you see works in marketing to older adults? Because, you know, building consumer software is one thing, and then you have to market it. And I see that startups today have multiple creative ways to get to the older adults or the family caregivers that they are serving. What have you seen that works in your portfolio companies? What innovative go-to-market strategies have they deployed?
One that is not necessarily new, but I think not enough startups in on this is the word of mouth viral aspect because of due to the natural network effects of a business. I know social products are not they're not in vogue these days, but there's a lot to be said for the power of word of mouth when people are experiencing or finding a product that they really love and they benefit from or have, some willingness to share with their friends. So, there are a few companies that are building social experiences for older adults, and some of them are, virtual online, some are in person, but the experience of these events get better as you have your friends or neighbors or people that join. So I think that's an example of the distribution that I think not enough companies are tapping into. And I think in some ways this applies to non-social products as well, because it might be a cool technology that older adults or their caregivers are telling each other. I just had an interesting conversation a couple of weeks ago with a small group talking about hearing aid, and there was everyone's complaining about how hearing aids not working for their parents. And one person shared her father recently finished through a new hearing aid and said, night and day, everything is so much clearer now. Everyone wanted to know what that was, and I'm sure they went home and did their research. So I think word of mouth is still the most powerful, and to the extent that you can build that into the product, build that into your marketing, I think that's one channel that companies are not leaning into it.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's human nature. If we find something good, we want to tell our friends about it. And we sometimes may want to be seen as the early adopter in our group, in our social circle that's telling everyone about the cool new things that are actually improving our lives for the better. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think making tech cool is a key part, because a lot of the challenges for older adults, they are personal in nature, and in fact, people try to hide the needs, and how technology maybe will help them, and that's not doing anybody. And so, but if there's tech that is really helpful, it's good to share that, even though it might put you in a vulnerable position.
Absolutely. So are there any specific challenges of aging that you are currently looking to invest in because you think they're exciting opportunities, blue ocean types of opportunities?
One area that I think is still underserviced is, I guess the term might be career extension or career longevity, getting people into people that are retired or semi-retired, more working opportunities, because there's so much knowledge and experience out there for those that either are forced to retire or can no longer do the physically demanding work or they've done all their lives. But the uh, societal perspective, there's a lot of knowledge that's locked up and lost. And there are also jobs in society where there the people, shortage of people able or willing to do that. So trying to do the matchmaking between those two and people that have their knowledge and what now are looking for some flexibility in their work. And then also the workplace that needs that knowledge, that mentorship, and can benefit from some of the flexibility that this workforce needs. I think that's one area that is still not well served and lots of opportunities there. But another area that I'm looking at is not so much a market or problem. Because I'm a technologist at heart, if I also look from the technology perspective, is there's so many new tech that's coming on board that is reaching critical mass that can now be deployed to older consumers, older users. Of course, I'm sure you see tons in AI and robotics, but also, smart glasses, ambient sensors, all these things are relatively new and people are still trying to find applications for them. And I think within elder care and just the needs of the aging population, there's a lot that can be served by these technologies that haven't really been tapped into yet.
Absolutely. It's one of the things that I keep finding myself repeating over and over in the past 2 or 3 years is that I feel like, unless you're building rocket ships, which people are doing anyway, even though it's hard, for most of the stuff that people want to build, there's not really a technology barrier. I mean, you can pretty much build anything these days. You just have to figure out what exactly are you going to build and for whom, and really, make a case for it and really make sure that there is a market for what you're building.
And I'm excited about all those other technologies because there's, like, example is robotics or smart glasses. It's such a transformational tech. If there's a huge market for that, and it takes someone that understands the challenges of the opportunity within AgeTech to adapt some of those tech for specific problems within AgeTech. So it may not be a lot of, I'm going to say, hard tech or hard research going into developing this tech, but it's more about adapting the tech so it's usable, but so that it solves specific problems within its demographic.
Exactly. And I think robotics is a perfect example for that, because we already see like exoskeletons being used in logistics, right? In storage facilities and in agriculture, literally helping people do the heavy lifting. And only recently, on very specific instances, I've seen it being used also in healthcare, where people also do a lot of physical heavy lifting. And I really can't wait for the elder care industry and the healthcare industry in general to really adopt a lot of this existing technology from other industries, because yes, it is currently expensive, but it also could potentially help with the labor shortage, which we know is like critical issue in healthcare and elder care, and just basically help the frontline workers do their work in a way that causes less injury, less turnover. We already have the technology to do all of that. It's just not yet widespread in healthcare.
Okay. The technology is there. Some of this needs to put to use.
Exactly. So when startups reach out to you looking for an investment, what types of boxes are you looking to check in order for you to write a check?
Well, this Number one, because I am investing at such early stages, typically shortly after the first version of the product. I spend most of my time talking to the founder, understanding their motivation, understanding their journey. And for me, it's this person, um, what's their motivation? Have they demonstrated grit along their journey, whether in their previous career or their their progress in building the company so far? And then also how getting to my point earlier about the double-edged sword, like you said, is how focus they are on the particular problem, but also can step back and see the bigger picture. I think that's key because um, as most entrepreneurs experience, it's your first problem that you set out to solve is very often not where the business is. Very often not where you end up. So having that flexibility, having that, I guess, that mindset to be able to look at the broader picture helps develop the business and the business success over time. So those are a couple of the things that I look for when I talk to founders in person.
Awesome. And that was actually my last question. So is there anything else we didn't talk about that you would like to add? Any call to action to people in the audience?
Well, you asked me what am I excited about, what are the areas that I'm on the lookout for. I'll touch on some of those. Another is maybe not so much a tech or a startup opportunity, but I think we I don't hear enough from people in this ecosystem about the role that media has to play in this. And I say that because I come from digital media entertainment background, is that the reason why this segment tends to be underserved is because people are not thinking about it. Whether that's public policy, whether that's investors, these are things that are not front and center. And I think the more that media can shine a light on this, especially mainstream media, and talk about not just the challenges, but all the great things, all the opportunities that part of this our aging society. The more that people are exposed to this, I think it can shape public opinion and policy, and therefore how we think about this as a society as a whole.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think definitely traditional media has a role to play here in shifting the mindset and looking at the aging of the population not as a catastrophe, but as an opportunity to really figure out what we all are going to do with this new phase of life that suddenly has become available to us that did not exist for our ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
And now, like, what are we going to do? How are we going to really redesign basically this new phase of life? How are we
Make this
going to
straight for all of us?
Yeah. How are we going to rethink retirement? How are we going to reshape the workforce to sort of accommodate so many people who are able and willing to continue to work? How are we going to just give people more opportunities to not just live their best life, but like really thrive in their later years? Because we're all going to live longer. So we all need to take part in this.
Yes, and turn this into something that people are looking forward to as opposed to something that people are fearful of and dread.
Exactly. Well, Ivan, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. It was an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you, Keren. Thank you for having me on. Please continue doing this great work.
If you enjoyed this conversation, there's a video right here that YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. Until next time, stay humble, stay curious,